Okay. Welcome, everyone. Tonight, I'm lucky to have Dr. Josh Bowen with me. We're going to be reviewing his discussion, his rather ambush that he had with Darth Dawkins.
His epic failure. You can
Yeah.
say it. It's fine.
No, we'll see. We'll go through it. We're going to analyze it. See what we can do better. See the tricks that Darth played, some of his fallacies, and so forth. Hopefully we'll all be the wiser, and we'll all learn something here. Let me make sure everything looks good. It's good. I guess people watching, do we sound good? I rarely host. So I'm a bit of a novice when it comes to hosting. So you can let me know if something doesn't sound loud enough or so forth. This was a discussion you had on Discord, right? I think you had it on Discord. And there are two or three. I think there's two versions of it out on YouTube. You can search for it. I grabbed the one that's 58 minutes, and I took it. I cut out all the redundant questions that he asked over and over again, and I was able to cut it down to 16 minutes. So we'll start up. I put pauses in between each one. So what we'll do is I'll run like a segment of it, 1 minute, and then I actually will display what he said, and that will be our stopping point in which we can talk. So
awesome.
Let me share this and we can get started. All right. So hopefully it looks good. I just want to make sure. All right. It's up there. Great. All right. So okay, let's get started. I'll start. And people in side chat, let me know if you can't hear it or not. So hopefully you can hear it.
Proclaiming that they're atheists. The central theme of these is, you're atheists, right?
Central theme of these is that you're an atheist, right? So he's talking about all the shows you've gone on. I find this pretty humorous that, he thinks we go on these shows and have like an atheist powwow. And I think it's kind of projection on his side. Personally, I don't give a darn about being an atheist. I could care less. I'm not committed to atheism at all. I don't really need to defend it. It's just a position that I've just come to over time. I'm not committed to it. I'm not loyal to it. I don't think we should be loyal to our beliefs at all. We're just in pursuit of the truth. Now, I'm sure we have biases and so forth, but I don't know, this idea of that you go on these shows just to promote atheism, to support your tribe and so forth. I think it's kind of projection on his part.
Yeah, it definitely caught me off guard.
Yeah. But it kind of gives you a good idea of how he kind of thinks, and how people like that are kind of threatened by what you do, your publications and so forth. It's kind of revealing. That's why I kind of started off with this. And this was at the very beginning as well. So we're going to continue.
Oh, because I don't believe there's a deity.
Okay. So is that on rational grounds, or do you just irrationally deny there's a God?
All right. Is that on rational grounds? A question I wish you asked Darth, and perhaps he rarely answers questions, is what do you mean by rational? In fact, I think you did ask him a number of times in the Hangout. What do you mean by rational, Darth? And he never answered. I think by rational, what he means is deductive, logically deductive. to be a rational atheist, you must have a knockdown, single deductive argument for why no God, in his words, of any concept of God doesn't exist. And I don't believe that is what rational means. Rational does not mean logically deductive. Now, to have a logically deductive argument is one of the means of being rational, but there's other means as well. There's induction, which you brought up during the discussion. There's abduction, and there's other rational norms. Rationality is a normative concept. A normative concept simply means what we ought to do to achieve that purpose. One rational norm could be evidence. So a simple formula, for example, would be that for rationality is that your confidence or your how strongly you believe something is in accord to the amount of evidence you have. That would be a rational or epistemic norm. So a clear sign of irrationality would be a simple formula of having a strong belief plus poor evidence. That would equate to irrationality. But I think what was unspoken in his mind was, unless you don't have a deductive proof, unless you don't have a modus tollens argument where if A then B, A therefore B, you're totally irrational as an atheist. But I think that simply goes too far. If you simply have good reasons to present for your position, as well as the theist can just simply be rational and present his reasons as well. You can be considered rational, but of course, Darth being Darth, he's going to raise the bar and hold you to the highest standard possible. So that's what I think what's going on there. Now, a standard of truth. A standard of evidence isn't necessarily a guarantee of truth. If you offer evidence, that's not a guarantee of truth. It's simply it's a standard which shows you how you came to that belief. So you're showing your work. In other words, you're showing your homework of how you came to the belief. It doesn't guarantee that it's actually true, but it's showing you your reasoning process and so forth. So, you have anything to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I think throughout this whole thing, and I'm sure you'll mention it, but I kept feeling like we're floating in between what do I believe and what can I deductively prove? And so it felt like he would ask me, what do you believe? And I would answer that, and he'd say, deductively prove that, in not so many terms, but like, how do you know that, is what he would say. And I would say, well, I don't know it. And somebody has criticized me, and I think reasonably so, that my epistemology of, again, not my field at all, Floyd, but, knowledge to me in this conversation is deductive, like a valid and sound, or a sound, deductive argument. That's the only way that I could know something. And I don't know that that's the only way somebody could know something, but again.
We would get into epistemology here. To have knowledge, one definition is justified true belief. So you believe in something, it's actually true, and for it to be true, we can talk about what truth means, and then you have some sort of justification for it. So you just didn't get lucky that you actually derived that belief in a normative manner. So if those three things hold, then you have knowledge. For example, I'm making a knowledge claim that there's a computer monitor in front of me right now. So for that to be considered knowledge, I have to believe it. There actually has to be a computer monitor in front of me. That would be the truth condition. And what caused me to have that belief was occasioned by the computer monitor actually being in front of me. Now, if those three things don't hold, then I don't know it. But if they do hold, then I can have knowledge. So I don't hold to the JTB theory of truth, justified true belief. I hold to a reliableness theory. So for me to have knowledge, I have to believe it. It has to be true, and it comes from a reliable mechanism. So, for example, for me to claim that I know the monitor's in front of me, again, I have to believe it. The monitor actually has to be in front of me, and it came through a reliable process, namely my eyesight. If those things hold, then I know it. So, of course, you can go into a lot of skeptical theories from there. Well, how do you know that you know? Now we have to get into externalism versus internalism and so forth like that. Maybe a little later we can talk about that as things go along. But we can continue.
Why do you believe there is no God?
I mean, probably most of it has to deal with the fact that I deal a lot in history of ancient Mesopotamia and ancient Near East and where the Hebrew Bible comes from. And so looking at how, religion developed in the ancient world, and looking at how the Hebrew Bible developed in the religion of Judaism and ultimately Christianity. And just given what I know about Mesopotamian religion and Sumerian and Akkadian, that it just seems like this is another ancient Near Eastern religious development. I guess for the same reason that I don't believe in Enki or Enlil or any of the other Mesopotamian deities or religions or Ugaritic or.
This is putting me to sleep.
That's the genetic fallacy. Okay, so that's the genetic fallacy. Okay, are you aware of that?
I think, yeah. So because again, philosophy is not really my thing, but is it because where it came from? Then if I don't agree with where it came from,
it may be the case that somebody's faulty reasoning by which they concluded X, their reasoning might be faulty, but it doesn't follow from that X is false. Kai Nielsen,
sure.
the famous atheist author, wrote, the reasons for God may fail, but it still may be the case that God exists.
Okay, that's a genetic fallacy. In fact, that's not what Darth described there is not the genetic fallacy. Rather, it's actually called the fallacy, where what he described was that that even though the argument you gave is faulty, that doesn't mean that the conclusion is false. So you could have a really bad argument for a conclusion, and the argument is very bad, but that doesn't mean that the conclusion is false. It simply means you just gave a bad argument for it. That's the fallacy. And Dr. Joss, what you described as a genetic fallacy is correct. That you say the conclusion is wrong because of the origin of the argument, where it comes from, based on who said it or where it comes from, the origin. So actually, you are correct of what the genetic fallacy is, and Darth is actually wrong on what the genetic fallacy is. So you didn't actually commit the genetic fallacy. Now the question is, people watching, go ahead and Google genetic fallacy. If don't take my word for it. It's very easy to look up. Google genetic fallacy and fallacy. A typical example of genetic fallacy is like Hitler, Mussolini, or Bin Laden said 2 + 2 = 4. So therefore, 2 + 2 cannot equal 4 because Hitler, Mussolini and Bin Laden said it. Obviously, that's false. It doesn't matter where it comes from or who's making the argument. Something's true or false based on the merit of the argument itself. And perhaps Darth meant the fallacy. Perhaps he just got mixed up, and he meant that you're committing the fallacy. But I guess the question is now is we can ask you, did you actually commit the fallacy? Are you saying, oh well, these people have bad arguments and so forth. So, well, I mean, let's address the genetic fallacy. I don't think you said, well, these people are stupid or ignorant, therefore, these gods don't exist. Through your training, you notice, well, these gods are anthropomorphic. They kind of are substitutes for now what we believe to be not natural, like gods creating storms, for example. Now we explain naturally and so forth. I guess the different creation stories. We know they can't be all right. So, like you mentioned later, inductively,
yeah.
If these stories have been proven to be false through scientific and historic means, then inductively we can say anything else would be false as well. I don't consider that a genetic fallacy at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that looking back again, the question was, why do I believe it? Not how can I deductively prove it? And that's what kept throwing me, I suppose, during this whole conversation. So why do I believe that there is no God? Well, I mean, it seems like we have a pattern here, right? And because I work in the field of ancient Near Eastern studies, this pattern is pretty consistent through time. And so when I look at that data, what seems most reasonable to me, given the data, is that this is an ancient Near Eastern text. Now, there's no question that I was answering the question, why don't I believe Christianity or, one of the Abrahamic religions to be true, which is my position. I guess I would say I'm a local atheist, right? But I haven't given thought to Eastern religions or, other God concepts that I don't have any, idea about. Could one of those be correct? Sure, that's possible. It doesn't seem, given my experience, it doesn't seem likely, but that's my position. So, if I were saying therefore no God exists, well, again, sure, that would just be I wouldn't say that proves in any way that no God exists. But the question is, why do I believe? And that's why, anyway.
Yeah, so it's an inductive approach. The inductive evidence overwhelmingly supports that all gods are fiction. Because after all, Darth and Christians don't believe all the other gods exist. So just inductively, why should we think any God exists? One thing about the idea of gods is there's so many different viewpoints of gods. It's hard to nail it down. It's like trying to pick up Jell-O. But for me, I define God as the God of classic theism. That number one, this thing is a being. It's a person. It has consciousness. It's an actual person, and it has the three omnis. It's omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. And what theologians have done and apologists have done over time is they start stripping away the attributes. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, let's get rid of omnibenevolent. Okay, well, he's no longer your moral paragon, right? We'll just say he's just a we'll just say he's a mind that created the universe and nothing else. Well, we'll leave it at a deistic God at that point. Well, does the mere possibility of such a thing existing, justify believing it? There's so many, there's so many combinations of gods. If you believe them all, you would just bloat your ontology. It would be ridiculous. So, I think that's reason enough to provisionally deny them all. There's even a theological position called open theism, where they deny that God even knows the future. So let's get rid of the omniscient. So all we're left with is omnipotent at that point. Because as problems arise, these attributes become more and more of a problem. So you have to start stripping away. So what you're left with is, prove to me that the vague entity X hiding behind a rock somewhere doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I don't know. It could exist, but you're so poorly defining this God or making this God so unfalsifiable that it gets difficult. But we can just say, every God concept presented to us so far, doesn't seem to be, reasonably to believe in it. So just inductively, we'll just conclude that no God exists. But again, do we need a deductive argument for that to be rational? I don't think so. As far as the fallacy is concerned, again, it's an inductive argument. It's not deductive.
Right.
I think what Darth is doing here is, I think Darth is committing the fallacy. And what that means, what the fallacy is, let me read to you what it is. The fallacy is, let me see. While fallacious reasoning in support of a position does not in itself provide absolute proof that the position is false, it does mean that the person making the argument has failed to present any case for it to be true. Assertions that are supported only by fallacious reasoning and special pleading to get around debunked arguments are unlikely to be true. So the typical example about the fallacy is how we think about psychics, for example. Over the years, psychic after psychic has been shown to be frauds. When we actually put them to the test, you have people like James Randi and other people show that psychics, are frauds. And when we actually put them under stringent tests, they seem to fail. But that doesn't mean that one psychic might come along and actually be a true psychic, right? So for us to say, oh, well, all psychics so far have been frauds, so therefore, oh, you're a psychic, you're a fraud. Like, no, I could be the actual true psychic here. That could deductively. That could actually be true. But given all the experience we had in the past, it's rational to believe that this psychic as well is a fraud. So, and I think that's what the point you're trying to make to Darth was.
I mean, all of history is done that way. I mean, you can never get to a point where you can make some sort of deductive argument about the past when you're trying to reconstruct history or something. I mean, I say that. I mean, I'd have to think about specific cases where maybe you could, but for the most part, like when you dig a site, you can say, all right, well, here we see that in this level there's a burn, there's a destruction layer, and so it's not this. Like we can't have, the Israelites taking Jericho in the 15th century because there's no city there. But I mean, can you deductively prove that? No, I mean, because is there some explanation that could make that work somehow. Maybe I don't know. It seems like so much of this is inference to the best explanation, this abductive.
Yeah.
So
I don't think you committed the genetic fallacy, and most you might have committed the fallacy if you offered a deductive reason to doubt it, to criticize it, which you didn't. It was inductive and abductive. And I think Darth committed the fallacy here. So in hindsight, I don't think you actually did that bad of a job. Although Darth throughout this whole thing kept on saying, "Oh, you're committing the genetic fallacy. You're committing the genetic fallacy," where he even has the name of the fallacy wrong. So,
if he meant I was very bad at explaining my position, I think he's probably right.
Okay. All right, let's move on.
You positively believe that God is the necessary precondition of all facts that are not God? Do you believe that?
No.
Okay, so then you believe that the facts are independent of God.
Yeah, that sounds
good.
That sounds right.
Good. Well, that logically commits you to the denial of the existence of God.
Does it? Perhaps one definition of God. Now, Darth gets a lot of his material from Van Til and Greg Bahnsen. They're very they're kind of the most popular presuppositionalists. They kind of put presuppositionalism on the map. They were also Calvinists as well, and I think Darth was asked a number of times if he was a Calvinist or not. And I think he said no, but he doesn't answer a lot either. He likes to hide his cards because the more he reveals about himself, the more he can criticize. So he doesn't say it. But for the Calvinist conception of God, all facts are God-created facts. According to Calvinism, God foreordains everything based on His will. So I think Darth here is appealing to a Calvinistic God. But can a God exist, and can we deny that that God is a necessary condition for all facts? No, I don't think so. You could have a God that's just one thing, and you could be a Platonist, for example, and say forms exist independent of God, and God didn't create universal forms and so forth. You could have that view as well. Even if you are a Calvinist, there's one fact I think that is not God created, and that is that God itself exists. Did God create the fact himself that he exists? No, he didn't create himself, right? God's eternal. He's always existed. So God didn't create that fact. Just his nature of existing created that fact. But God himself did not create or control that fact. So, I don't think we necessarily have to, hold to this position. But even if you're agnostic, you could be agnostic about this. You could say, I don't know if God is a necessary precondition for facts or not. Presuppositionists will say, oh no, if you think there's a possibility that God is not the precondition for all facts, then you're an atheist in regards to this certain God. But actually, the agnostic is not saying that. The agnostic is not saying, well, it's possible that God is not the necessary precondition. He's saying, the agnostic is saying he doesn't know that a God is the necessary precondition. So he's not actually denying that, or he's not claiming that it could be possible that God is not the necessary precondition for all facts. He's simply saying, I don't know if God is necessary or not. So, what Darth says here, I think is kind of deceiving, and kind of this comes from like Calvinistic theology, which he might not even hold to, which I find is strange. But he'll do anything to win the argument. I think he'll bring up anything.
So do you have a reason to believe that what's fundamental to reality, the ground of all being, is impersonal? Do you have a reason for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Arbitrarily, I don't think so. I mean, again, I think I'm doing it based on a pattern that I see.
Okay.
I mean,
you say you don't have a reason to believe in God. That's the equivalent of saying that all the facts you're acquainted with do not necessitate referencing the necessity of God. Okay?
Okay.
Now, do you have grounds for that?
So you give your reason, saying, well, I see a pattern here. And then Darth interrupts you and says, oh, so you don't have a reason to believe in God. Well, you kind of offered your reason right there. You said you see a pattern, so you're offering your inductive reasons. And of course, he just ignores it. So I think this is, again, back to having a deductive argument to deny that God exists. And I think we see this throughout the whole discussion that you had with him. That, he's, and again, it's unstated. I don't think the word deduction or deductive proof or anything of that nature came up once during this conversation. You brought up induction a number of times, but he just glossed over it and just went back to, what's your argument? What's your proof? What's your grounds? As though, it can only be deductive. So I think, when you come across people who do this, I think you need to stop them and saying, well, get it right out in the open. Say, do you mean a deductive proof? Is that what you mean? And is that what you mean by being rational? That to be rational, you can only use deduction, and you cannot use induction. You cannot use abduction. You cannot simply provide the evidence against the position. I think we need to get that out in the open.
I was trying to do something like that. I'm sure I'm doing it terribly, but like if he was saying that it's irrational to believe that the sun is going to rise tomorrow because it's possible that it might not, then I guess by that standard, fine. Like induction's not rational, but I don't know that that's irrational to think that the sun is going to come up tomorrow, right? Yeah. Unless we're using it in a very specific, by rationality, by a very specific definition.
Yeah. As David Hume brought out, inductive reasoning is deductively circular. It's circular reasoning. No, actually, circular reasoning is not invalid logically. It's A, therefore A. That's actually valid deductively. You're just repeating the same thing twice. A, therefore A. The reason why it's fallacious, though, circular reasoning is fallacious, is because of the principle of explosion. You can prove anything that way, right? Unicorns exist, therefore unicorns exist. A, therefore A. A can be anything. So even though it's logically valid, it's fallacious because of the principle of explosion. You can prove anything, with it. But induction is something that we all accept. Our dogs, use inductive reasoning. They'll run to their food bowl every morning because in the past food's been there. So in the future they believe, food will be there. When we wake up in the morning, we get out of our beds, we pull our sheets off and we step onto the floor. We're using inductive reasoning, assuming that the floor is actually going to be there. Why? Because it was there in the past. So I'm going to assume that's there when I get up in the morning as well. Darth actually mentions, well, as a Christian, I can justify induction. Why? Because in the Bible, it says that God will keep the seasons going and stuff like that. Nothing concrete. They just proof text. Anything that kind of sounds like the uniformity in nature. But they have faith that the future will resemble the past, just like the non-believer has faith that the future will resemble the past. And it could be the case that it might not. A meteor could hit the Earth tomorrow, right? We don't know that. Everything could end tomorrow. If the laws of physics change tomorrow, well, then that's pretty much it. If it is, then if the laws of physics change tomorrow, then I don't think we're going to be around to witness that. I think everything will fall apart. But again, it just seems like he's just, without saying it, he's just holding you the standard of deduction here. That's what it sounds like.
These people, they just came up with these ideas for a phenomenon controlling the physical world. Okay, so they might be wrong. The point is, that doesn't get you to your position that there's no God.
Yeah, and I think so. I feel like we're talking about maybe two different things, and maybe we're not. Maybe I'm just missing it. That's entirely possible. I think that I would say that most of what drives me to disbelieve in the divine is my experience with, and when I say experience, I mean that more than just like emotional experience, I mean like intellectual, literary, whatever, with the religions, the concrete religions like Christianity, like, those that you see in the ancient Near East. So like, if this is why I made the statement at the beginning, when you asked me if I'm an atheist, I said, I think so. What I mean by that is, I certainly don't know that there is no God out there ever. I don't know how I'd possibly know that.
But you believe there's no God.
Yeah, I haven't seen, so the deities that I've interacted with,
So
the deities
why do you believe there's no God?
Yeah, that's why I say I think it's inductive. So in the sense that
but that doesn't, you've said that already. Okay. So that's the equivalent of saying that all the facts around you do not necessitate referencing the necessity of God. Okay. So how'd you determine that facts are independent of God? Do facts derive from something else that you believe is ultimate that's not God?
Okay. So basically, it's getting to a point where he's asking what your worldview is. It's like, well, if God doesn't exist, how do you explain facts about anything, really? You could simply say, well, just things exist without God. That's part of my worldview. But I don't even think you need to do that. You don't even need to step outside of his worldview. You can just do an internal critique saying, well, the problems within Christianity are such that it doesn't make sense, and so forth. And again, you can just say, well, I don't see why it's necessary that God exists for there to be facts. Again, I could be a Platonist. Things could just come about through the quantum realm, which brought about the Big Bang and so forth, in which all reality, all the physical reality that we see now exists and so forth. I don't think we necessarily have a concrete answer for it.
And that's the thing that always gets me at this point in these conversations is, and I'd like to know what you think about this. What I always think about is, I don't know how my cell phone works, like my iPhone. I don't know how. I know like the basics of how that call is made, but as far as down at the, internal workings of the phone, if you said, how does your phone work? What is it that causes that to work? I don't know. Well, then you can't use your phone. Well, that's not true. right? Just because I don't know what causes it to work doesn't mean that there's not something there that makes it work. That's what I always come back to with this. So if we're defining ultimate as something that, is at the bottom, at the foundation of everything, is there something there? I mean, fuck if I know, but sure, maybe. But because I don't know what it is, does that mean that nothing else in my system works? No, because I mean, it does, right? What do you think about that? What
Yeah, that's fine. So, you recognize things exist, but yeah, do we have to know exhaustively everything about it? When we see an apple or a phone like you brought up, do we actually have to know everything about it down to the microscopic level? Or we have to know the physics involved and so forth? Can they explain why their God exists? Well, God just is, right? He's always existed eternally. Why is that? It's just a brute fact, right? They can't explain why God exists. That's just in their worldview, that's just the way it is. Well, we could say the same thing. The physical reality around us could simply be a brute fact. It could come from a quantum realm or some impersonal force. And why does those things exist? It's just a brute fact. It's just the way it is. Now, maybe we'll have a better answer in the future. But again, do we have to make up a story of where this comes from? No. Whatever you say about why your God exists, you can say, well, that's why the reality that I recognize exists. It's just the way it is. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They'll bring up things like the Kalam cosmological arguments, like, well, nothing. We don't have an experience of anything just poofing into existence out of nothing. Well, that's true. We don't have any. We don't have evidence of things just popping out of nothing, but we don't have any evidence of any supernatural being popping things into existence either. So their argument just fails in regards to that. If you're going to appeal to evidence of things just not popping out of nothing, well, okay, there's no evidence of supernatural beings popping things out of nothing either. So,
want to know is you've offered 2 lines of reasoning why there is no God. Okay. You made an appeal to how the beliefs in gods developed in Mesopotamia. Okay, that turned out to be the genetic fallacy. Then you made an appeal to induction, which is also a fallacy, because in order to determine that all facts collectively don't indicate a universal or general principle, namely God, you would first have to determine God does not exist in order to rationally conclude there is no God. So appealing to induction doesn't get you there.
So there it is. So appealing to deduction doesn't get you there. Well, why not? And get you where exactly? Get you to a deductive proof, I think, is what he's saying here. You offered your reasons, which was induction, but he's saying, oh, it doesn't get you there. Get you where? Get you to a deductively sound argument, and with deduction, with like modus tollens, for example, if P then Q, if you have P, then it necessarily follows that you have Q. And I think that's what he's trying to demand from you here. He says himself, appealing to induction does not get you there. Well, why not? Because it's not deductive. Maybe he means something else, but that's how I'm interpreting what he's saying here.
Yeah, every time I hear him say show me that there is no God, as opposed to why do you believe there's no God? I feel like very often the question starts off, why do you believe? And then when I answer the question, well, that doesn't necessitate that there is no God. And it's like, but wait, those are 2 different things that you're asking me. So,
yeah, I mean, again, to be rational, I don't think we need a deductive proof. We can just simply offer the evidence. You brought up how these anthropomorphic gods just kind of represent nature. The storms and so forth. I mean, we even see that in the Bible, right? We have Samson, right? Samson looks pretty clear to me, in the Book of Judges, that he's a sun god. I mean, the word Samson itself means sun, doesn't it? And in the story, when he cuts his hair, he loses his power, right? Well, yeah, it's the sun losing his rays. So if the sun loses his rays, like cutting his hair, he's going to lose his power. So, we have here anthropomorphic beings representing what we now understand to be natural forces. So again, I think the inductive evidence overwhelmingly supports that all gods are fiction. It's just could we just simply see, like you said, we simply see a pattern. But so appealing to induction does not get you there. What's there? Mm-hmm. I think he means to a deductively sound argument. That I could be wrong, but that's how That's how
it came across to me.
Yeah.
Book, The Atheist Guide to the Old Testament, right? So you must have, so you must have a good reason why Christianity as a worldview is categorically false. What would that be?
Yeah, I mean it's sort of multivariate. So, for example, the things that I was brought up to understand as God being providing prophetic oracles in the in the Hebrew Bible that come about in the New Testament, and Moses being the author of the Pentateuch, and this being a divinely inspired book that was inerrant. Those sorts of things are incredibly problematic.
What's problematic about the Bible? Why would any proposition whatsoever be off limits if the Christian worldview is false? Or excuse me, we shouldn't say false, because outside the Christian worldview, how could you determine that any proposition is off limits? What ultimately would make any proposition off limits?
Okay, this is when he goes full presup. But also he brings up Christianity. And that's actually a good thing, because now we're just not talking about some vague generic God, right? We're talking about the Christian God. And at this point, I would go on the attack. So, okay, we're talking about a specific worldview. We're talking about the specific Christian God. So now we have something better defined that we can focus on. So I'd bring up things like how like general revelation does not match special revelation, for example. Like historical facts don't match with the Bible. Scientific inaccuracies, the failed prophecies of the Bible, the internal contradictions within the Bible, and so forth.
So this was something that, and you tell me what you think. I'm not a terribly assertive person in discussions like this. I tend to go where people want to go, but it started to go that direction, right? In this clip, I was like, okay, we got failed prophecies, and you got authorship of the Pentateuch by Moses, and these things don't work. And it seemed like it very quickly shifted back to how do we even know anything, as opposed to, all right, let's talk about those problems. I mean, there's a part in the conversation where it does go that way for maybe a minute, but then it seems like it very quickly goes back to how can we even know anything? So
yeah, he's flip-flopping, and he goes full presup here. He's going to say, well, first of all, he said off limits. What does that mean, off limits? Now, I interpret that as false, not true. But whenever he makes these vague terms, now you have to ask, what exactly do you mean by off limits? Again, this vague terminology. We're kind of guessing of what he means, but
it sounded like that whole, what makes this possible or impossible.
Yeah. And he's asking you, okay, well, how is truth possible within your worldview? But if we're going to critique the Bible and Christianity, you don't need to have an external worldview to evaluate it. You can evaluate it within. In fact, because it seems like he's a inerrantist. It sounds like he believes that the Bible is inerrant. A lot of Christians, his fellow Christians, are not biblical inerrantists. There's plenty of Christians who freely accept that there's historical and scientific errors in the Bible. So you don't need to have your own concept of truth or an individual epistemic method to evaluate the Bible. You can borrow the Christian worldview and find problems within itself. Catholics recognize inconsistencies, historical problems with the Bible. For
You're gonna give me my fucking money back.
Excuse me, sir. There's a young man in here and your wife.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
I can call the police if you'd like me to. You need to settle down.
You need to settle down and mind your business, okay?
Both of you guys?
Ma'am, once again, ma'am.
I said both of you.
No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am.
I actually said both of you guys. It was a general.
Right beforehand, you fucking said sir.
Sir? Okay.
Motherfucker, take it outside. If you want to call me sir again, I will show you a fucking sir.
I apologize.
Motherfucker.
I apologize now.
I need your corporate number because I'm going to call them and talk about how it's misgendered several times in his store.
I apologize for that.
I need your corporate number now.
I can get it for you. That's not a problem.
Get it for me now.
I'm going to ask you to calm down and stop cussing.
Give me your
Stop
corporate
hitting
number.
bitch, run property.
Well, I'm going to ask you for the 5th time to stop calling me a man because quite clearly I am not.
And I apologize. I'm sorry for that, ma'am. I will get you that number. Is that okay?
Yes, get it for me now.
I'm asking you to stop
Get it
cussing.
for me now. I'm not cussing. I'm not cussing.
Okay.
Get me the damn number now, please. Ooh!
Ma'am, I apologize.
Ooh!
I apologize, ma'am. I will get you that number right now.
For example, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops recognize that the Lucan census story is historically problematic. They outright say around their website that historically it's basically unresolvable to make sense out of the Lucan census story. Does that mean God doesn't exist or Jesus wasn't resurrected from the grave at the third day? Stuff like that? No, not at all. They just recognize that there's some problematic historical facts about the Bible. So you don't necessarily have to have your own definition or your own separate worldview to evaluate the problems within Darth's worldview. Fellow Christians bring up these problems themselves, but now he's kind of saying, well, what is your definition of truth? Now we're getting into philosophy here. We're getting into epistemology and how do you derive at the truth? Now, I mean that's a whole philosophical discussion there. What is truth? Well, in philosophy, there's never one answer. There's the typical, I guess probably the most popular definition of truth is the correspondence theory of truth, and that is that truth is a correspondence between a proposition, a statement, a belief, and so forth, and the state of affairs that that it describes. So in other words, it's just what corresponds to reality. And and what do we mean by reality? Well, that's the actual state of affairs. But there's other theories as well. There's semantic theory. There's deflationary theories of truth. There's coherence theories. There's pragmatic theories. If you ever listen to like Jordan Peterson, he seems to hold to a pragmatic theory of truth, where what is true is what gets you through the day, so to speak, is what pragmatically this works, and so forth. But I pretty much hold to the correspondence theory of truth. But now you have to have a whole discussion on epistemology at this point, and a lot of people aren't prepared to have a discussion like that. If you haven't really studied these philosophical notions, they're hard to express. What is truth in my worldview? What I think is true. Well, no, you use truth, and you use the word true in that definition. That circle, you can't do that. He's gonna get nitpicky at this point. But I typically hold to the correspondence theory of truth as many people do. But again, I don't think we need to go there. I think you can just evaluate inerrancy and so forth, within the Christian worldview. In the Christian worldview, A cannot equal A, not A. The law of non-contradiction holds within the Christian worldview as well. So if you can just point out a contradiction within it, well, okay, then you just showed a problem, within the Christian worldview. But yeah, he's going full precept here,
Well, you think that certain things in the Bible are problematic and consequently false. But in your not Christian worldview, there's no final court of appeal or ultimate state which dictates what is, can be, or cannot be to make any proposition off limits.
I mean, I don't know that there isn't one. I just don't know that I know what it is.
Okay, if you don't know what it is, then how can you say any proposition is off limits, even including questioning the Old or New Testament? Let's talk about your field, okay? You wrote a book called The Atheist Guide to the Old Testament, which I haven't had a chance to read through, and I look forward to reading it, okay? But you obviously in that book call into question certain propositions that are either wrong or fallacious or simply are off limits for whatever reason. So in your worldview, what makes any proposition off limit, including statements in the Bible?
All right. Well, in our worldview, what makes something false? I think that's what he means by off limits here. What makes something false? Well, if you go by the correspondence theory of truth, what makes something false is if it doesn't correspond to reality. It's interesting. He says in your non-Christian worldview, there's no final court of appeals. So he's imagining that I think he's confusing epistemic fact with an ontological fact. Imagine you're watching a baseball game, right? And baseball, the hitter hits the baseball and it goes near the foul pole, and the referee, the umpire declares whether it's a foul ball or not. So, and the umpire in that case is the final court of appeals, right? The umpire could declare it, foul or with fair play, in bounds. That's the final court of appeal. Now he could be wrong, right? The umpire is a human, he's fallible. So in that case, it would be an epistemic fact. Do we know whether it's a foul ball or not? Now, if God was the umpire, God's infallible, right? So if God dictates, or if God declares it to be foul, then since he's all knowing, then it actually is ontologically true that it is foul or not. But in our worldview, what is the ultimate state of affairs that decides that? Well, the actual state of affairs is whether it's actually a foul ball or not. A god, an umpire, or even a god declaring it so doesn't make it a foul. What makes it a foul ball is how the hitter hit it, right? So, I think this is back to their worldview again, their theology, where all facts are God-made facts. So for that foul ball, God ultimately made that ball a foul ball, if it was foul. I think they get it from their theology that that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Right? Truth is in there. So they want to attach all truth to God. And if you don't have God, then you don't have truth. I think that's where they're going there. But that's within their worldview. Is that a problem with our worldview? Okay, in our worldview, we have no God. Well, what would be the ultimate state? Well, the actual state of affairs would determine that. I don't see this as a problem. They're kind of begging the question here, saying we need God to decide what's actually a fact or not. No, ontologically, things are on their own true or false. We have to discover that, and we might be wrong in discovering it. We're fallible beings. We might get it wrong, but that doesn't change the ultimate state of what things are. So, I don't really think this is a problem for the non-Christian worldview. And of course, non-Christian, I don't think this would be a problem for a Jewish person or a Muslim either, because they have a God to appeal to as well. So.
Then you believe that the Christian worldview is false?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, then what is your worldview that would falsify it?
Well, again, I think we can do an internal critique. We don't, again, I mentioned this before. A Christian could point out the problems. Could bring up, for example, the problems with the Exodus. I think, didn't you say, Dr. Josh, you're coming out with a second volume of your book?
Yeah.
And you're going to deal with the Exodus there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, some Christians and Jewish people recognize that the Exodus story is problematic. That as described in the Bible, 1 Kings 6, for example, actually gives a precise date of when the Exodus happened. So if we take a very literal view of the story, and things didn't happen, like 480 years before.
Mm-hmm.
Before Solomon's temple, I think it says. If you take a literal view of the Bible that way, then you're going to have trouble. But again, do we need a separate worldview to evaluate this thing? No, I don't think so. And again, I think our non-Christian worldview can handle it fine. Did it actually happen in history as described in the Bible, literally or not? But again, there's plenty of Christians that don't take all the Bible literally. So, there's different ways of handling this. But again, I think we can just simply evaluate within his worldview.
What is your worldview, and how does it provide for determining what is erroneous versus not?
If something contradicts is probably a good example.
Contradicts what?
So maybe a good example would be Genesis 37, right? The story of Joseph. Like, how does Joseph get down to Egypt? Right? That's problematic in the text if you're viewing it from like a single authorship position. If you think that, but if a person
Why is it that if I don't have an answer to a question, how does it make something false?
Oh, the irony right there. Oh my. That's
when you put it up on the screen, it just like it illuminates things that I miss. It's great.
Yeah. Oh boy, yeah. What a hypocrite. What a hypocrite. This is the very thing that he attacks atheists. And here he is, appealing to it himself. This is something right there. Why is it if you don't have an answer to a question, how does that make it something false? Oh, I don't have an answer for how the universe came into being. Oh, you don't? Well, I do. God did it. Oh, well, don't criticize me because I don't have an answer. Well, for it doesn't mean atheism is false, right? Here's just one double standard that presuppositionalists and apologists, commit. But yeah, this is a real charm right here.
I don't know that I've thought
your
about.
worldview is whatever you conceive to be ultimate, dictating all other sub-beliefs in the world around you. It's your interconnected web of beliefs by which you interpret everything. And either in that worldview, there is something that is ultimate, the ground of all being, that dictates what is, can be, or cannot be, or you are without that within your worldview. So that when you make evaluations as to whether your hair is parted correctly, or you like the taste of this cheeseburger, or that this politician is lying, or that Moses is not the author of the Pentateuch, or whatever.
Right.
I want to know, what is your worldview that allows you to make any determination of true, false, good or bad, real or erroneous? You say certain things don't comport with reality. Is reality the same thing as your worldview?
It sounds like that's how you're defining it, and I'm fine with that.
I don't see how there would be a difference between reality and a worldview.
That's not correct. He actually, at the beginning of this, he actually defined what a worldview is, but then later he says it's no different than reality. Reality is the actual state of affairs, right? A worldview is your belief set about reality, and those are two separate things. Reality is what it is, and unless you're an idealist, I personally believe that there's an objective external world to me. I'm not a solipsist. I'm not an idealist. If there's books behind me, if I turn my back, I still believe there's books behind me, where an idealist thinks, no, those books don't exist anymore. But I'm not an idealist. I actually believe there's a mind-independent reality out there. So reality is what it is. A worldview is your belief set about reality. Now, it seems like what he's asking you is, okay, what's your worldview? He's basically asking you, what is your metaphysics? And by that, it's where your background beliefs are. What are your foundational beliefs in which you reason from, in which you form other beliefs, like you mentioned, did Moses, write all the Pentateuch, everything else that you derive from. So that's actually a good definition of what a worldview is, but it's not the same as reality. Reality is what it is. A worldview is your belief set about reality. So I think this is confused on what he's saying here. But he's basically asking you, what are your metaphysical beliefs? Well, a lot of people confronted by that question, they might not have an answer. They might not have thought about it that much. So when you come across that, what is your overview? A lot of people might not be prepared to be able to answer that question. What is the ultimate state of reality? I don't know. some quantum realm. Maybe everything is physical. Everything can be broken down to just matter and energy. It's hard to say. Now, I can offer some of my metaphysical background beliefs. I mentioned a few already, that there's a mind-independent reality, that the world has certain regularities in which minds can understand things about the world, that my memory is reliable, the valid nature of deduction, the reliability of inductive inference, things like that. Those are very foundational, which philosophers call properly basic beliefs, and those are beliefs that we all take for granted. It's not something that are taught to us. Your mom didn't have to teach you to trust your memory and so forth. Those are just things that we take for granted, and we cannot justify rationally. Our foundational beliefs are something that we can't justify rationally, because those are the tools of rationality. Those are the tools. Just like you use a ladder to climb up to get to other things, you don't use the ladder itself to get to the ladder. You use the ladder. So our metaphysical beliefs are the tools we use in which we interpret other things from. So I think that is what he's asking you about here. But a lot of people aren't, unless you've really studied philosophy and sat down and think about it, a lot of people, aren't going to have an answer to this, right away. You really have to think about it. Yeah.
Or if I read through the creation story and I see, man created on the sixth day at the end of creation, and then I read through Genesis 2 and I see that he's created at the beginning, and then there's a separation of woman's created. In my mind.
Well, hold on a second. Okay, you're an educated man. Who says that the Genesis 2 is chronological?
Coming at it, and this is why the chapter in the book about the authorship of the Pentateuch focuses in on this, because it's not an issue for biblical scholars to look at this, because
you're dead certain that Genesis 2 is chronological.
There is, again, you have to be dead certain about something, or we can
it's
deny
wrong.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's I feel like this is the significant disadvantage to being. There's no way that I can say, yeah, dead certain. I mean, I don't know that if dead certain means there's absolutely no way that I could be wrong about that. And there aren't many things in my life that I would say that about, and certainly not when it comes to, the translation and interpretation of a 2,400-year-old, 2,500-year-old text. But I mean, if you ask any of the translators of the English text that he's reading, right, and say to them, if he's making a deductive argument based on the English translation of a particular set of verses, and you were to ask those translators, are you dead certain that you've translated that phrase correctly? I mean, if they're honest, they're going to say, dead certain. I mean, if by that you mean that I'm absolutely correct and there's no possibility of error, no, of course not. So then his whole argument would fall apart under that logic, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, doesn't ancient Hebrew, it doesn't even have vowels, right? It doesn't have vowel points or any vowels in the words, right? The ancient Hebrew, vowel points and consonants uses vowels. That was a later invention.
Yeah, I mean, the vowels are there in the language itself. It's just not in the writing until later in the Masoretic tradition. Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, the common inerrantist claim is that it's not in chronological order. But I think that's problematic. Obviously, we can identify there seems to be two different sources, and in the P source in Genesis 1, man and woman are created on the same day together. Where in the second one, it's a very Yahweh Elohim is a very anthropomorphic God.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the text just has a different feel.
Yeah.
And this anthropomorphic God kind of just makes things up, like tries things, and things don't work out, so he tries something else. First he creates man, and then he says, "Oh, man needs a helper, so I know I'll create the animals for him." Oh, doesn't seem to be working out that well. Okay, I'll create woman, out of his side, rib, and that's, if you follow that reasoning that Yahweh has, then chronologically it has to be the case.
Yeah.
And that's a good enough reason to believe that we should take it chronologically.
Yeah, I mean, so there's no question if we step away from this absolute certainty thing, which am I absolutely certain that Melech in Hebrew means king? As much as a human being can be, but if you take a step away from that absolute certainty requirement, yes, there's no question that it's chronological. I mean, it uses the standard Hebrew narrative form, right? And this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So yeah, I mean, Dr. Kip Davis has a video actually that he put up on this particular topic in this particular chapter. So yeah, I mean, there's just no question. There's a reason that Christian apologists say things like, or like if you read the NIV, it says, "Now God had created the animals," right? Well, the reason that it says "had created," they're trying to work a pluperfect into that. And the reason that they're doing that is because they recognize that as it stands in the Hebrew, I mean, it just that's a Vav consecutive imperfect form. It just means, and then he created the animals. So yeah, I mean, there's a reason that's a problem, and that you have to come up with different ideas.
Yeah, the renowned Bible scholar Bruce Metzger from Princeton Theological Seminary, he ripped apart the NIV. He really criticized it. The best example I can give to kind of like how the NIV is, really twists the text is in Genesis 2:17, where the Hebrew and other translations says, "In the day that you eat from it, you will surely die." In the NIV, they actually remove "in the day." They just take the words out because because it's problematic.
In Genesis 37, that really difficult passage if you're trying to read it as single authorship, when the Midianites come and pull Joseph up out of the pit, it's just a third person plural verbal form there, right? And they went and pulled him up, and it's clear from the context that it's the Midianites doing it. But if that's the case, it seems like there's two different stories going on here. So the NIV says, "and the brothers pulled him up," but the brothers isn't in there. It's them reading that into it. It's interpreting that. Now, with all that being said, I really like the NIV for most people because I think it's one of the easier ones to understand that for the most part captures what the text is doing. But I mean, yeah, you just got to be careful with it.
Yeah. And I would have really drilled into this because this is your world here. This is your expertise. So I would have really held Darth's feet to the fire on this. I would ask him, well, what are your reasons to think it's not chronological besides getting you out of this pickle that you're in?
That's a good point.
Yeah. Say, well, what are your reasons for believing that it's not chronological? Simply to fix your inerrancy problem that you have here. What beyond that do you believe that it's not chronological? There's another theory that we hear from apologists, and I think it's even worse, where they say that the events in Genesis 2 is a separate event than in Genesis 1. And in Genesis 1, they create humans in general, but the stuff going in the garden is a separate event.
Yeah. Who is it? It's Victor Hamilton in that Nycott series I think he posits, if I'm remembering, that it's the animal creation is a separate special garden animal creation, which I don't know. It's just funny because it's so clear, not only from the Hebrew what it's doing, but it's so clear that it's an apologetic attempt to try to explain away, the contradiction between the two chapters. So,
yeah, and that's where it's not where we get the idea that there's pre-Adamic humans, that there are humans existed before Adam. It's problematic because the Genesis 2 story is an theological tale. It's supposed to explain why there's painful childbirth and why we die and why we wear clothes and why we have to work so hard and so forth. And it actually says Eve is the mother of all living. It says, right? If this was some special event, well, none of that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that theory is even worse than the it's not chronological theory, but I think both are problematic. But yeah, if you hold to inerrancy, you're going to have to come up with these ad hoc explanations. If you're up against Seichen Bruggencate, who's the kind of disgraced presuppositionalist at this point, he would say, I don't do Bible studies with atheists because of what we just discussed. He doesn't want to get involved in these sort of discussions because these are problematic, and that's what presuppositionalists do. They always want to attack the other person's worldview. They never want to talk about their problems in their own worldview. They just want to attack, always be on the offensive, never be on the defensive. But I'm surprised Darth actually went here. But if he wants to talk about the Bible, boom, I would go full attack at this point. Oh, you want to talk about the Bible? Okay, now we're talking. So this could have been a good opportunity right here.
Is there something in your worldview that connects all the dots, or makes anything? No. Do you believe that there's anything in your world that connects the dots between particulars of existence and makes what things are, can be, or cannot be? Is there something that imposes that?
All right, so we're back to metaphysics here. Connects all the dots. Again, I would ask him to define that. We can guess what we think what we know what he's saying here, but is there anything in my worldview that connects all the dots? How about the law of causation? One thing causes another. All effects have an antecedent cause. Wouldn't that connect all the dots? Now, that could be a trap because causation is another properly basic belief. David Hume, again, we're back to philosophy here, brought up this problem. We cannot infer causation. We just assume it. So when we see a billiard ball hit another billiard ball, we're assuming that first billiard ball caused the other billiard ball to move. Well, it could be a case where it was just a coincidence that the first billiard ball moved, but the second billiard ball perhaps moved on its own to do it. But obviously we don't believe that, right? He could be trapping, again, the philosophically naive person to bring up the law of causation. And now you have to defend that in worldview. Again, that's, for me, it's part of my metaphysics. It's a properly basic belief. that could be the direction he's going here. But yeah, he's going full pre-sup with this question. This is a question that you could ask any worldview, any person with any worldview. You could ask this question to it, and in his worldview, again, he would just give a God did it sort of answer. That's the way God designed the universe. Well, in my worldview, this is the properties of the universe, where one thing can cause another. One thing can interact with other things. So again, there's no contradiction within my worldview to explain why the dots connect. But again, when he brings up these terms, you really got to ask him to clearly define what you mean here. What imposes that? Well, the properties of the universe imposes that. That's the property of how the universe interacts. That's the nature of the physical universe. That's what imposes that. That's how I would answer.
So then all you're just simply talking about is it seems that way. Well, you could be wrong about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's no question.
And you could be completely wrong about your critique about the Bible, right?
No question. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And you're willing to risk your eternal destiny on it?
Okay. Why is that a concern? Eternal destiny. It looks like this is Pascal's wager right here, right? You can't force yourself to believe anything. This is known as dosastic voluntarism, that you can just make yourself believe things. You can't do that. When someone brings this up, so I would ask them, can you believe that you're a dog right now? Can you believe it? You could start pretending to be a dog. You can start barking and lift your leg up against a tree and stuff like that. But you really wouldn't believe you're a dog. You would still believe that you're a human acting like a dog. So you just can't force yourself to believe something. If your experience is that you don't believe it, are you willing to risk your eternal destiny on it? Well, that assumes that some God is going to send you to an eternal punishment for not believing. Well, why should I believe that? Well, that assumes that his theology is true. Well, you need to prove that as well. But this is just a appeal to consequences. It sounds like here. Again, he brought up certainty again. Could you be wrong about that? Well, I could be wrong about that. I could be right about that. Well, again, that sort of question, you get desperate when someone asks that sort of question.
Yeah.
You think it's true has no metaphysical basis. There's nowhere in your worldview to ground truth. In the Christian worldview, and you studied theology, you went to Capital Bible Study, and you would know from the Christian worldview, truth is that which conforms to the mind of God and how he reveals it. But in your worldview, what does truth conform to? And please don't say reality.
Don't say reality. Well, why not? That's how I define truth. Truth is what corresponds to reality. It's a relationship between a belief, a statement, a proposition, to the certain state of affairs in which it represents. So why can't we say don't say reality? He's trying to deny. He's trying to deny your own worldview. So that's an external critique. Instead of accepting the metaphysical positions within a worldview, which is an internal critique, he's not letting you do that. Imagine if I said to you, I want you to do this math problem, but don't use your brain. Don't use your brain, but do the math problem. or can you digest this food, but don't use your stomach. No, don't do that. No. These are the tools that define our worldview. This is the metaphysical position that we have. So this is unreasonable. What he's doing here, and then truth is what conforms to the mind of God and how He reveals it. Well, in what way? What about God's mind that that truth conforms to it? In what way? Does God have thoughts in His mind which do not correspond with reality? He must, I would think so. Would God have some sort of counterfactual thoughts in His head? A Molinist would agree. I would even think a Calvinist would agree. Some theologians go as far as saying that God doesn't have any propositional knowledge, which I find kind of strange. But they go at length. But what does it actually mean that truth is what conforms to the mind of God? Now, I think they would say, well, it says in the Bible that God cannot lie, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, to have a falsehood means you don't have the truth, right? So to say God cannot lie would mean taking their definition, saying God cannot have a belief that doesn't conform with His mind. Okay, what does that mean? This is a useless tautology. To say truth conforms to the mind of God really offers nothing informative about what truth is. It's similar to their moral argument when they say what is good conforms to God's nature. So they say God is good, and what is good is what conforms to God's nature. So what they're saying is God's nature conforms to God's nature. It doesn't tell us anything about what goodness is. It tells us something about God, but it doesn't tell us about what goodness or what truth is. Analogy is, imagine if I said Jones has the property of progfiglianess. Jones has the property of progfiglianess. And I said, well, what does that word mean? I said, oh, progfiglianess is what comports to the nature of Jones. Now, what does that tell us about what progfiglianess means? Nothing. We have no idea what that means. Same way, truth and goodness, if you define it within, it conforms to the nature of God or the mind of God, it really doesn't tell us anything. Where in my worldview, I can answer truth is what corresponds to the actual state of affairs, to reality, and what's false is what doesn't correspond to reality. Now, God can know that thing. A all-knowing God would know exactly what conforms to reality and what doesn't, and He can even create the reality. So He would, since He's creating reality, He would know what's true because He created the truth. But to say truth conforms to the mind of God, I think is nonsensical. I don't think it means anything at all. And
I won't, because I don't know is the answer.
So when you reject Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior as Creator, you can't say what is true or false, can you? Your worldview doesn't provide for it. There's no metaphysical grounding to say what is, can be, or cannot be.
It seems like the difference between me knowing what grounds it, and I'm like, what
I want to know why you believe this stuff. You see, you believe that you do not need God. You do not need the God of the Bible as your creator and Lord and Savior and sustainer. So I want to know, because that is a grandiose statement in the course of human history. You've solved biggest question of all human existence. You don't need God. You don't need the God of the Bible. So I want to know what you do believe, not necessarily what you know. What do you do believe that makes Jesus Christ as Lord and Creator utterly non-existent and superfluous? What do you believe ultimately about your world that makes Jesus Christ as Creator unnecessary?
There's a lot to unpack right there. When you say, when they ask, I believe something or I know something, he's still asking you the reasons for it, right? He's asking you a justification. So saying, I know something, I believe something, okay, yeah, knowledge is held to a higher standard, but there's still truth claims. A belief claim is a truth claim, and a knowledge claim is a truth claim. They're both truth claims. So when he's asking you for the reasons, he's asking you for a justification. So he could keep us out. Okay, yeah, I don't. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to say no. How do you know this? I'm going to ask you why you believe it, and then by asking you why you believe it, I'm asking you for a reason, a justification. So now we're back to justified true belief, which is the definition of knowledge. So saying I believe P, or I assert P, or I believe P is the case, or P is true, or I opine P, or I opine P is true, that's all those statements are saying the same thing. They're all expressing the same truth condition. So it doesn't matter if you say I believe P or P is the case. That's all saying the same thing. So when he says, well, what are your reasons? What's your justification? Yeah, he's saying, how do you know that? No matter how he tries to reword it, he's asking you for a justification for it. So it's very subtle. It's very tricky. But when you ask for your reasons, again, he's asking you for a justification, which now goes to the level of knowledge. If I said, oh, I believe there is a pink unicorn in my backyard right now, and you ask me, Floyd, why do you believe that? Oh, well, the magic 8-ball informed me that. I asked them, I have a magic 8-ball. I shook it. I asked it, is there a pink unicorn in my backyard? And it came up, yes. Oh, that's why I believe it. Now, no, that's a bad justification, but that's my justification, right? You asked me for the reason. Well, that's the reason I gave. That's a really bad epistemology I have there, where I consult the magic 8-ball. But again, I'm still making a justification of why I believe something. So that's what's going on right here. It's very subtle, but he's basically asking you for epistemic justification for why you believe that. So again, saying I believe something, I assert something, I believe it's true. It is true. It's my opinion that it's true. It's all expressing the same truth condition.
The Hebrew Bible seems to be another ancient Near Eastern text.
Could you be wrong about that?
There is again. Could you be wrong about that? Well, I could be wrong about it. I could be right about it. Now, if my reasons for it are true, then no, I can't be wrong about it, because ask that is about. I could be wrong. I could be right. Here are my reasons why I think I'm right. Just the possibility of being wrong. We're all fallible human beings. Can we get over that and move on? If you're going to be that skeptical about everything, we wouldn't get anywhere in life. We have to ask that question. It's really not constructive at all. But again, I would say, you could, with Darth, I would say, no, I can't be wrong about that given the presuppositions of my worldview. So if my metaphysics are correct and my reasons are correct, no, there's no possible way I can be wrong. Right? That's how I would answer. Now, you would then ask the question, well, how do you know that's correct, right? Now that's a whole different story. But no, if you're going to evaluate my worldview, well, if the presuppositions of my worldview are correct and my reasoning for having that position is correct, no, there's no possible way I can be wrong. So, I mean, that's one way to answer. But, when you hear that, you're saying, you as a fallible human being, could you be wrong about X, regardless of what X is?
Right.
Well, me being fallible, yes, of course, I could be wrong about that. But with this presup tactic that's going on here, this is a comparison between worldviews. Yeah. So you're saying within my worldview, if the metaphysical background beliefs of my worldview are correct and my reasoning is correct for why I hold that position, then no, I can't be wrong about that. That's how you can shut him down in regards to stuff like that.
You believe that the text of the Old Testament is not the product of God inspiring holy men of the past to write down the message that he wanted. That's your position.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you know that?
Logic.
See, the way that you're using the word "know" there.
Why do you believe that?
Okay.
Yeah, this is the same thing I talked about before. How do you know that? He slipped and they changed it. Why do you believe that? Again, he's asking you the reasons for why you believe that. He's asking you a justification, which falls into the level of knowing that, right? That's why he said, how do you know that? But,
yeah, I think my problem, and this is probably just an issue with me not understanding the finer points of epistemology. Every time I heard him say, how do you know that? I equated that with how can you deductively prove that to be the case?
Yeah. Now, I don't think we have to go that far to have knowledge. You just have to have some sort of justification. Again, the proposition is going to be true independently of whether you believe it or not. You certainly have that belief. Whether it's true or not is not important. It's true regardless if you believe it or not. So what's left is the justification for it. What are your reasons for believing it? So when he asks, how do you know that? Or why do you believe that? It's really the same question, isn't it? He's asking you, what are the reasons for you believing that? He's asking you for the justification for it. That's how, again, it's not a guarantee of truth. It is, you're explaining the methodology you use to derive at that belief. It's a pragmatic reason for of convincing other people, of communicating to other people why you have that belief. I don't know why I can't say pragmatic tonight. I'm having trouble saying pragmatic.
So why I believe it is given what I know about ancient Near Eastern culture and literature. The Bible fits in, the Hebrew Bible fits in very well with other ancient Near Eastern texts.
That doesn't mean it's not inspired by God.
You're asking me why I believe.
Yeah, see, that's where I'm getting hung up, Floyd, because his responses to me are not, okay, let's deal with the specifics of your justifications. Is there a connection between the Hebrew Bible and the wider ancient Near Eastern mythological scene? Or it's not that, it's that it doesn't necessarily follow from that, which is a deductive argument, right? That's why I keep getting this. This is why I had a problem with this, because I kept thinking, okay, well, when he says no, he means deductively prove. That's how it always came across. I don't know.
Yeah, that's how I think it's what's happening here as well. Oh, that doesn't necessarily follow. Well, yeah, necessarily follow. Yeah, the deductive proof, modus tollens. If P then Q, P there before, it necessarily follows that Q is the case, and that's the standard he seems to be holding you to.
Yeah.
So he's just raising the epistemic bar on you.
Yeah.
Right.
But it doesn't. But it doesn't follow then that it's not inspired.
Right. You're asking me why I believe it though, which I think is different from why it necessarily follows. And I wouldn't say that it necessarily follows. Right. I would say I believe it.
So the Bible could possibly be the inspired word of God in your view?
Yeah, sure.
Did you put that in your
I don't think it's very likely. Well, I mean, I think that's
why is it not likely? What would make that off limits?
I feel like we're sort of circling back here.
Yeah, this is the end, but it doesn't follow. So yeah. So again, he's asking, you have to have a deductive proof on anything. A historian wants to discover what's probable, not what's possible.
Yes. I actually gave a presentation on this at the Atheist Network groups online. What do we have? Meeting, I don't know, in October 8th, I think. And it was basically like when I have these arguments, of course, it did not work terribly well here. I think it requires someone who's not out to win, if that makes sense. But in the presentation, it was, okay, look, when I talk to people about things in the Hebrew Bible, for example, historical problems, I don't come with the approach of this will be a deductive proof. I'm going to say, given the data points, what is the most reasonable model? Which model best accounts for the data points? And I think that's where I end up in so many of these discussions, because that's as far as we can push it. I think in so many cases, which model best accounts for the data points? Is it possible that Nebuchadnezzar was Belshazzar's father? Is that possible? That he was his grandfather. That father there, meant meant grandfather there, and that Nabonidus married a daughter of. Is that possible? Sure, it's possible. Like, why would we think that though? Like, is that the most reasonable conclusion? We have this completely different explanation for why it is that Nabonidus is not mentioned in the text and Nebuchadnezzar is. That's much more reasonable of a model to explain the data points.
Yes, it's less ad hoc. They're coming up with ad hoc explanations to get them out of this problem that affects their inerrancy. Where we're presenting the evidence. Here's the evidence. So this is what leads us to believe it. Can we twist it? Come up with one ad hoc explanation after another. Is that how scholarship is done? Could be wrong. Oh well, I guess we could dig up some ancient text tomorrow, which kind of explains it better, right? Well, okay. Well, at that time, we'll revise our views.
Yeah.
No, but apparently our eternal destiny is hanging on the balance here. So we need to do it. Yeah. And back you said, it's like, oh, you as an atheist, you don't need Jesus, do you? You don't need God, do you? It's like, what a loaded question.
Mm.
It's like we're just angry, we're just full of hubris. I view myself as a fallible, dependent human being. If there's a God out there who cares about me, I'll take all the help I can get. but but again, it's interesting that that's how they view it. We're just shaking our fist at God. We don't need you. We don't need your help. It's like it's like a disobedient child saying to their parents, I don't need you. I can do it on my own. And then then you run away from home and you're sleeping in some gutter somewhere.
Yeah, right. Or with pigs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'll take all the help I can get.
Yeah.
I just, if someone can help me, I'm more willing to take it, so just, how they view, someone outside their faith is, quite revealing. I think that is it.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay. Now, I've seen a number of videos. You're an atheist, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they've had a number of people request that I have a conversation with you. Would you like to tell us why you're an atheist?
You think so?
Actually, I'm just kind of listening while I work.
I mean, you're a talking head on all these YouTube shows all the time, proudly proclaiming you're an atheist. Surely you could spare us a couple of minutes and tell us why there's no God.
I mean, I'm not much into philosophy.
Are you not a regular talking head on these atheist chat shows?
I mean, I do go on a lot of shows that are atheists.
Yeah, and you're a fairly intelligent, educated man, and you've regularly proclaiming you're an atheist. So how is it that there's no God?
Yeah, I don't really know that I'm qualified to make that determination.
Wait a minute. Then why do you go onto all these talking head shows proclaiming you're an atheist and, having camaraderie with all these other people proclaiming that they're atheists? The central theme of these is, you're atheists, right?
Oh, because I don't believe there's a deity.
Okay. So is that on rational grounds, or do you just irrationally deny there's a God? See, because I want to talk with you, because I've listened to you. You seem like an intelligent guy. It's clearly you're quite highly educated, and I deal with a lot of knuckle-dragging troglodyte atheists who are just incompetent. So why do you believe there is no God?
I mean, probably most of it has to deal with the fact that I deal a lot in history of ancient Mesopotamia and ancient Near East and where the Hebrew Bible comes from. And so looking at how, religion developed in the ancient world, and looking at how the Hebrew Bible developed in the religion of Judaism and ultimately Christianity. And just given what I know about Mesopotamian religion and Sumerian and Akkadian, that it just seems like this is another ancient Near Eastern religious development. I guess for the same reason that I don't believe in Enki or Enlil or any of the other Mesopotamian deities or religions or Ugaritic or.
This is putting me to sleep.
That's the genetic fallacy. Okay, so that's the genetic fallacy. Okay, are you aware of that?
I think, yeah. So because again, philosophy is not really my thing, but is it because where it came from, and if I don't agree with where it came from?
It may be the case that somebody's faulty reasoning by which they concluded X their reasoning might be faulty, but it doesn't follow from that X is false. Kai Nielsen,
sure.
the famous atheist author, wrote, the reasons for God may fail, but it still may be the case that God exists.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So you believe that that there is no ultimate mind that is the source of all possibility of what is, can be, or cannot be. So other than your appeal to the genetic fallacy that people use wrong reasoning to come to the conclusion that God exists, okay, how is it that there is no ultimate creator God?
I guess sorry, good.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I don't know that there is no deity. Like, I don't know that there is no God.
I didn't ask you that. I said, why do you believe it?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, as far as my experience with other religions of the ancient Near East, they're not convincing to me either. And because of what I know about where the Hebrew Bible comes from, and its connections to the ancient Near East, what seems most reasonable to me is that it's born out of this ancient Near Eastern context.
Do you positively believe that God is the necessary precondition of all facts that are not God? Do you believe that?
No.
Okay, so then you believe that the facts are independent of God.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds right.
Good. Well, that logically commits you to the denial of the existence of God. So you do deny God exists. So how is it that God doesn't exist?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a problem with denying that God exists. I think that seems like that makes sense.
Do you have rational grounds why there is no God?
It's probably more of an inductive conclusion that I've made than a deductive one.
Do you have rational grounds why there is no God?
I'm just trying to make sure I understand what you're asking. You're asking me to prove it?
You have adopted a universal negative, which is that all facts do not necessitate referencing the necessity of God. How did you determine that universal negative?
Sorry, I'm trying to piece together what you're asking. How they made a positive. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying, that implicitly I've made that a positive.
Are you trying to represent that your atheism is not the denial of the existence of God, but that you're somehow non-committal about the existence of God?
I guess I've never thought about it in those terms. I would say that if you ask me, do I believe that a God exists? No. Am I still on?
Okay, I'm back. It crashed on me.
Oh, okay. I thought it was me.
Okay, so
it crashed on me too.
Okay, yeah, so do you recognize that either your position is the denial of the existence of God, or as commonly is done among atheists, you make a claim that you're just simply non-committal?
I guess what I would say, I mean, again, I'm okay with saying, I generally don't think about it in terms of any God. Although if I think about it in that sense, probably that's the case. Yeah.
So you either recognize your position is the denial of the existence of God, or you're claiming a kind of neutrality, non-committal. Okay, which is your position?
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I'd say my position is that I would be okay saying that there are no gods. I don't know that, right? Okay. But I'd be okay.
Do you believe that there is no God on rational grounds, or do you just arbitrarily and irrationally assert that there's no God?
I don't know if I understand specifically what you're asking. So, do you want me to give you? You want me to give you my grounds?
Your position is that. Oh, here we go again.
Just me, or is this the?
No, it's Discord.
It's happening for everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Wow, this is pretty cool. It's gonna keep happening a couple more times.
Okay, so what's your
Say
rational
that,
basis that there is no God?
Given what I know about, and I mean, this is all very general, I suppose, thinking about it this way, but given what I know about the world and the way that it works and what I know about, in particular, cultures and religions from the ancient Near East, where, again, the Hebrew Bible sort of comes from.
Well, setting aside people's faulty reasoning in the past, okay, what I'd like to know for you right now, why is it that there's no God?
So I guess that's what I was trying to say, was the way that I come at this is to say that for the same reason that I think, I'm not trying to be, I don't know, simplistic or whatever, but for the same reason that I think that there's a rational reason that the Mesopotamian pantheon developed, that similar circumstances and events transpired to bring about the development.
Are the Mesopotamian pantheon, are they ultimate?
Ultimate. I don't know that they would have thought about them in that sense.
Did they begin to exist? Are they the source of all possibility of what is, can be, or cannot be?
That's a good question. You mean from how they would have considered them?
Yeah, because the gods of the ancient world, which obviously you have great expertise in, which I don't, none of these gods are ultimate. Okay, what I'm talking about is the God where God is ultimate, where what is eternal, absolute, and is the creator is in mind, and is the source of all possibility. Your position is that does not exist. I'd like to know what your rational grounds for that, other than the fact that you believe that people have used faulty reasoning to come to believe in other gods. Okay, because it doesn't follow from that there's no God, because people.
No, I agree. I agree, and I guess what I would say is I mean, I'm sure this is all very common and low level for what I'm getting ready to say for you guys, because you seem to talk about philosophy quite a bit more than I do. But like, I would obviously draw a distinction between what I believe to be the case and what I know to be the case.
Okay.
So
you believe there is no God. Why do you have rational grounds for that belief?
I guess what I would say is because I don't see a reason to believe that a deity exists.
Okay. Do you have a reason to believe that what is ultimate is impersonal and governs all possibility? Do you have a reason to believe that?
Something that's ultimate and impersonal?
Yeah, you will either believe that something is ultimate, dictating all possibility, or you'll reject the notion that anything is ultimate at all. Determining what it.
Sorry.
Okay. So do you have a reason to believe that what's fundamental to reality, the ground of all being, is impersonal? Do you have a reason for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the only thing that I'd be able to say to it would be like and again, I hope I'm using the term correctly, but an inductive approach to that, where I would say, in the same way that, people in the fourth millennium thought that the storm was a deity and that the sun was its own deity.
So you don't have a reason for that which is ultimate as impersonal then. You just adopt it arbitrarily?
Arbitrarily. I don't think so. I mean, again, I think I'm doing it based on a pattern that I see.
Okay.
I mean,
you say you don't have a reason to believe in God. That's the equivalent of saying that all the facts you're acquainted with do not necessitate referencing the necessity of God. Okay?
Okay.
Now, do you have grounds for that? How did you determine that all the facts that you're acquainted with do not necessitate referencing the necessity of God? How did you decide on that, other than questioning people's faulty reasoning in the past?
Yeah, I don't know if it's... Sorry, I'm trying to understand exactly.
You've determined that all the facts that you're acquainted with do not necessitate referencing the necessity of God as the precondition of all facts. So how did you determine that?
It sounds like what you're asking, and just correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like what you're asking is, how do I know that to be the case?
No, I didn't ask you that. I said, why do you believe it?
Okay. Well, if it's why do I believe it, then again, I think it's from this sort of inductive approach to it, where it doesn't seem like. Sorry.
So induction can tell you what then is ultimate and that it's not God?
I don't think it tells me with any sort of...
Induction is just appealing to various facts around you.
Right.
And then trying to derive general or universal principles.
Yes.
What is ultimate will be, no pun intended, the ultimate universal. Okay?
Right.
So when you say you use induction, you're just deciding that all the facts around you do not derive from God as the ultimate universal. How did you determine that?
Oh, I see. I mean, I think I see. I guess the way that I would answer that would be sort of to draw something analogous to it, in that, again, it's sort of general, but because, the storm and the sun and, all these things were considered to be deities. And then as it turns out,
You're just appealing to your opening line of reasoning, which is the genetic fallacy.
Sure. I mean, I don't think that I could prove
Setting
that.
aside other people's faulty reasoning, you have decided that all the facts around you do not necessitate referencing the necessity of God as the precondition of all facts. How did you decide on that? Excluding people's faulty reasoning, how did you decide upon that?
I'm trying to understand what you mean by utilizing people's faulty reasoning.
You keep on going back to saying, well, these people developed, they came up with believing with these gods in an erroneous fashion. Well, so what? Okay, that's the genetic fallacy. What I want to know from you right now, you've decided that all the facts around you, okay, do not necessitate referencing what is ultimate and that it's a mind, God. How did you reason to that?
Because it doesn't, if I'm answering it, I might not be, but I'm trying, because it seems like there's no need for it.
You're restating the same claim in different words. When I say you've decided that all the facts around you do not necessitate referencing the necessity of God.
Yeah.
So when you say there's no need to do it, you're just simply restating the same position.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a different way to come at it then. I don't know that I can.
Because I watch a lot of these atheist talking head shows. I watch a lot of the so-called deconversion shows. Mm-hmm. I'm not hearing from any of the YouTube atheists who I either listen to on a regular basis, the shows that you hang out on, mm-hmm. or the very few of them that are willing to have an interaction with myself. I'm not hearing from any of them in a concrete way why there is no God, other than this feigned, oh, I'm unconvinced.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's, I'm just sort of guessing here, but I mean, maybe that's why the approach is more of a, I don't know, what is it that said, like a lack of belief?
That's an ambiguity. Everyone who denies the existence of God lacks belief in God. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
But your position is not a mere absence of belief. Your position is there is no God.
Yeah, I do believe that. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, good. So is that rationally grounded or is it irrational?
Right. Unless there's a specific use of the word rational here that I'm unaware of, which is entirely possible.
Do you have a reason to believe there is no God?
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like if I say it again, it's probably going to be saying the same thing. So I don't want to.
Well, then you mean the genetic fallacy?
Yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily consider it to be that, but
that's a genetic fallacy. all these people in the times past, these ignorant Slavs, not that you said that, but
No, definitely
these people, these people, and maybe I shouldn't use those terms, but these people, they just came up with these ideas for phenomenon controlling the physical world. Okay, so they might be wrong. The point is, that doesn't get you to your position that there's no God.
Yeah, and I think so. I feel like we're talking about maybe two different things, and maybe we're not. Maybe I'm just missing it. That's entirely possible. I think that I would say that most of what drives me to disbelieve in the divine is my experience with, and when I say experience, I mean that more than just like emotional experience, I mean like intellectual, literary, whatever. With the religions, the concrete religions like Christianity, like those that you see in the ancient Near East. So, like, if this is why I made the statement at the beginning when you asked me if I'm an atheist, I said I think so. What I mean by that is, I certainly don't know that there is no God out there ever. I don't know how I'd possibly know that.
But you believe there's no God.
Yeah, I don't. I haven't seen. So the deities that I've interacted with,
So
the deities
why do you believe there's no God?
Yeah, that's why I say I think it's inductive. So in the sense that.
But that doesn't. You've said that already. Okay, so that's the equivalent of saying that all the facts around you do not necessitate referencing the necessity of God. Okay, so how'd you determine that facts are independent of God? Do facts derive from something else that you believe is ultimate that's not God?
That's sort of like that sounds like a question that's probably way over my area of expertise.
The only way that you could determine that facts are unrelated to God is that you would first have to determine there's no God.
Yeah.
If you don't first determine that there is no God, then you could not ground that facts don't necessitate referencing God, could you?
Yeah. See, this is where I feel like this is why I'm trying to use the word believe, because determine seems like it's a knowledge. It seems like it's more of a knowledge claim. Maybe it's not, but it seems like it is.
Well, the difference between knowledge and belief is just sometimes a fine line and a matter of emphasis, because rarely do people have beliefs that have no warrant or justification whatsoever, and we reserve the word knowledge for the highest amount of warrant or justification, whereas belief is for lower or weaker warrant or justification. So
I guess.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I was just going to say, like, this, like, was something like, oh boy, let's see if I can dig back into my college philosophy. Who was it? Was it David Hume that had the problem of induction? Am I getting that right?
So
I think that's who it was.
Yeah.
Somebody will correct me.
So when you say you use induction, okay, you couldn't use induction to falsify God, because so you first offered the genetic fallacy. The second line of reason is induction, okay? But you couldn't use induction to show that there's no relationship between facts and God unless you first determine that God does not exist.
Right. That's why I say it sounds like we're like moving into the realm of proof, and I certainly don't have anything like that.
So your God denialism then is irrational?
Maybe just for my sake, when you're using the term irrational, what do you mean?
It means that you have no reason for that belief.
I think I do have. Let me say it this way: it's the same way that I have reason that the sun will come up tomorrow.
I'm not understanding your point. Okay.
Like if I'm remembering it, it wasn't that like David Hume's big thing. Like you have no rational reason to conclude that the sun will come up tomorrow. And am I totally embarrassing myself here? Isn't that what he said?
No. I mean, I think that was his position, but as a Christian, I would disagree with him.
Sure. Yeah. No, right. From that, but from my position or from my worldview.
Well, what I want to know is
whatever.
you've offered 2 lines of reasoning why there is no God. Okay. You made an appeal to how the beliefs in gods developed in Mesopotamia. Okay, that turned out to be the genetic fallacy. Then you made an appeal to induction, which is also a fallacy, because in order to determine that all facts collectively don't indicate a universal or general principle, namely God, you would first have to determine God does not exist in order to rationally conclude there is no God. So appealing to induction doesn't get you there.
So if we're using rational in the same way that David Hume is using it, then I agree. Like again, we're so far outside of my field talking about philosophy.
You're on the Talking Head atheist shows all the time, okay, as an outspoken atheist. What I want to know from you, other than your first 2 lines of reasonings, which have turned out to be a fallacy in all due respect, I want to know why you believe there is no God. Because it's my position that atheists, both educated and uneducated alike, are motivated by a prime directive. They do not want there to be a God, so they collect for themselves all sorts of cliches, slogans, and catchphrases that they think are rationales, but in fact they're not. So if that's not the case with you, if your God denialism is not because you don't want there to be a God and you're just collecting atheist cliches, what is your reason why there is no God?
Yes, I mean, just to sort of maybe talk to that for a second, like, I was an evangelical Christian for 26 years. I pastored a church out in Virginia. And when I went to Johns Hopkins, my first year there studying this, ancient Mesopotamian literary texts.
Didn't you go to Capital Bible Seminary?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Studied under Todd Beale,
that's a good seminary.
Yeah, they drilled the languages into me. I had a lot of fun there.
Okay, so your reason that there is no God is?
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say that. Sorry, just because you asked about the. Am I one of those that wants there to be no God?
Yeah,
absolutely not.
Yeah. Oh, okay, then what's your reason? Then what's your reason that's not fallacious? That there's no God.
So I guess I'm getting hung up on fallacious, but I mean, so the reason that I determined that my belief in the God of the Bible.
I didn't mention the God of the Bible. We're talking about your atheism.
No, I'm trying to walk through the process. Was that it didn't hold, right? And so, I mean, I left Christianity kicking and screaming. But then it sort of broadened to, the same reasons that I don't think that Christianity stands up as an accurate representation of reality or whatever.
How would you? Okay, so the Christian worldview, what you're just saying is simply not true, right?
Oh, sorry. The Christian worldview is not true. Yeah, I think that's the case. Yeah.
Okay. And how did you determine that?
Yes, I mean it's probably a longer conversation.
Yeah, because you just wrote a book, The Atheist Guide to the Old Testament, right? So you must have so you must have a good reason why Christianity as a worldview is categorically false. What would that be?
Yeah, I mean it's sort of multivaried. So, for example, the things that I was brought up to understand as God being providing prophetic oracles in the in the Hebrew Bible that come about in the New Testament, and Moses being the author of the Pentateuch, and this being a divinely inspired book that was inerrant. Those sorts of things are incredibly problematic.
What's problematic about the Bible? Why would any proposition whatsoever be off limits if the Christian worldview is false. Or excuse me, we shouldn't say false, because outside the Christian worldview, how could you determine that any proposition is off limits? What ultimately would make any proposition off limits?
Would make any proposition off limits.
Yeah.
I don't know that I understand.
Yeah. Well, if somebody presents to me something as a Christian to me, I say, no, I don't believe that, because that's inconsistent with what God has revealed. It's my Christian worldview. And the ultimacy there in the God of the Bible, which is the final court of appeal, which mitigates against a certain proposition. But if you object to certain propositions in this world, like it's superstitious to think that walking under a ladder is going to give you bad luck, or that there are certain errors in the Bible, what would ultimately and fundamentally ground that any proposition, including certain statements in the Bible, would be off limits?
Oh, you mean like why would like a contradiction be problematic or something like that?
Yeah, if you say, this verse in the Old Testament is off limits and this verse in the Quran is off limits, and somebody walking under a ladder, it is off. It would, being superstitious, bad luck from that would be off limit. Why would any in a not Christian worldview, why would any proposition be off limits ultimately?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have the expertise to answer it well.
So then you have no grounds to object to any propositions from the Bible, then, do you?
Let me try to be clear. It sounds like a similar question to, I hate to keep going back to it, but it's the only thing I can think of at the moment. But like the problem with induction, like I don't have a good answer for the problem.
Well,
with induction.
you think that certain things in the Bible are problematic and consequently false. But in your not Christian worldview, there's no final court of appeal or ultimate state which dictates what is, can be, or cannot be to make any proposition off limits.
I mean, I don't know that there isn't one. I just don't know that I know what it is.
Okay, if you don't know what it is, then how can you say any proposition is off limits, even including questioning the Old or New Testament?
I guess it would be based on, and I'm sure I'm saying things that you've heard before, so forgive me, but I suspect it's based on things like logic and reason.
Is there something that ultimately exists that makes what is, can be, or cannot be, including logic?
I'm not sure.
So you're using "I'm not sure" as an attack against the Bible?
I don't think I would say it that way.
Well, wait a minute. You just wrote a book called An Atheist Guide to the Old Testament. And even though we're not agreeing and I'm, hitting you with hard questions, maybe I could snag an electronic copy of your book in my DMs.
I'd be happy to send you. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to send. I can send you a PDF of it.
I'd like to read that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I guess what I would
I'm getting a plug-in for your book.
No, I appreciate that. I think what I would say, like you're probably right about, I don't know, again, anybody like you or anybody else listening to me, this is completely not my field.
Okay, well, let's talk about your field. Let's talk about your field, okay? You wrote a book called The Atheist Guide to the Old Testament, which I haven't had a chance to read through, and I look forward to reading it, okay? But you obviously in that book call into question certain propositions that are either wrong or fallacious or simply are off limits for whatever reason. So in your worldview, what makes any proposition off limit, including statements in the Bible?
Yeah, I mean, I think the furthest I'd be able to, quote unquote, go back, for me anyway, with my training in philosophy, which is none, would be, to say, like, I don't know, the laws of logic or something. Like you can't have
The laws of logic don't stand in causal relations, making what is, can be, or cannot be, other than it just stipulates that an entity is what it is in a time index, and it cannot equal or coexist with its negation. But beyond that, the laws of logic don't make what things are or can be or cannot be.
Oh, sure. Like they're descriptive. They're not prescriptive.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Just,
oh no, I agree. I
it's
guess
just
what I'm
that in a
saying
given
is
time index, an apple cannot be not an apple, but the laws of logic don't dictate the properties of
Right.
the apple.
Yeah, and I guess in the same way, this is just so I'm mirroring you, so I understand.
So
I think we agree on this.
So you're evaluating the Bible, and you're trying to lead people to believe that this is not an inerrant book. This book is not inspired by God because X, Y, and Z is problematic and is to be considered wrong or false or erroneous. Well, what in your worldview that dictates that anything is erroneous?
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I think my position would be that I think the fundamentalist or maybe more conservative evangelical interpretations of the biblical text have problems, right? So inerrancy, inspiration. I don't think that necessitates that Christianity is wrong. I think that it's wrong, but I don't. Like, my wife is a Christian, so I don't think that it necessitates that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think that my wife is irrational in any way in holding to her Christian faith. I don't think that it's correct. Not her. I don't. Obviously,
So you think so when you say, well, then you believe that the Christian worldview is false.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, then what is your worldview that would falsify it?
What is my worldview that would falsify it? I don't know that I know a good answer to that.
Well, then you can't hold that Christianity is false, can you?
I think if I understand what you're asking, I think probably I operate in the same way that you could. It sounds like you could say to me, and I think you could, and you'd be justified in saying it, that I don't have a rational reason to believe that the sun will come up tomorrow, or, like I can't justify that.
Does your worldview provide background information in order for you to declare that anything is erroneous?
I think maybe in the sense that it doesn't, if I'm using this correctly, it doesn't cohere with reality as I see it, as I experience it.
Yeah, reality would equal your worldview. What is fundamentally your worldview that would dictate what could not be and is erroneous?
Yeah, I don't know a good answer to that other than.
So you wrote a whole book criticizing the Old Testament, and that certain things in the Old Testament are erroneous, but your worldview doesn't provide a rationale to declaring things are erroneous?
Oh, I'm sure that it does. It doesn't mean that I know what it is.
Well, then if it does, then how did you arrive at that?
How did I arrive at it?
Yeah, what is your worldview, and how does it provide for determining what is erroneous versus not?
If something contradicts is probably a good example.
Contradicts what?
So maybe a good example would be Genesis 37, right? The story of Joseph. Like, how does Joseph get down to Egypt? Right? That's problematic in the text if you're viewing it from like a single authorship position. If you think that, but if a person.
Why is it that if I don't have an answer to a question, how does it make something false? For example, did you know that we have eyewitnesses of the sinking of the Titanic? Some of them said they saw the Titanic split in half. Others said that they did not see it split in half. Does that mean the Titanic didn't sink?
Oh, no, of course not.
Okay. So what I want to know from you is, when you're evaluating any propositions, including the Old Testament and its content, and you determine that it's erroneous, I want to know what system you're operating from that gives you the ingredients by which you can declare anything as erroneous. What is your worldview? What is it that ultimately makes anything erroneous or false? Or let me put it this way: is truth and falsity apprehensible in your world?
Like ultimately,
is there ultimate grounds that by which we can determine that something is true or false or off limits? So, for example, so you believe certain things in the Old Testament are superstition, right?
Superstition. I don't know if I'd characterize it that way.
Are they erroneous?
It depends. I guess it depends on what we mean by that. So, for example, I don't think that 600,000 plus fighting men walked out of Egypt in the 15th century, right? But that doesn't mean that the Exodus or an Exodus event or a series of Exodus events didn't happen. And so the question is, what is the text doing? What is the text trying to say?
Is the Old Testament, is it false?
I don't know that I would characterize it that way. In the same way that I don't think I would characterize the Epic of Gilgamesh as false. If that makes sense. Like, I don't think it's...
Is that a part of your worldview?
I mean, I guess at a very basic level, it's just literary criticism, but... Is
the Epic of Gilgamesh a part of your worldview?
Part of my worldview. I don't know how you're using...
Because
the
Epic of Gilgamesh claims to give a creation account.
Yeah, I mean, Atrahasis does. I don't know. See, I think this is the problem, that the bigger issue that I'm trying to pull back to, or whatever, is that I think that coming to the text, any ancient text, with I don't know, like I don't want to say literalist, but an interpretive model that says, for example, okay, here's Genesis 1. Genesis 1 is relating actually how the universe was created, and so is Genesis 2. And so when there's a distinction that's drawn between those, and there are problems trying to make them align with one another, that we have to try to somehow figure out a way to make them harmonize. And I think that that's just coming to the text with, presuppositions or preconceived notions that are modern, that they wouldn't have come to them with, if that makes sense.
I'm still wondering how your worldview falsifies or makes any proposition in the Old Testament erroneous. Do you have a worldview that provides for that?
I don't know that I understand how you're using worldview. I don't understand. Honestly, I don't know that I've thought about.
Your worldview is whatever you conceive to be ultimate, dictating all other sub-beliefs in the world around you. It's your interconnected web of beliefs by which you interpret everything. And either in that worldview, there is something that is ultimate, the ground of all being, that dictates what is, can be, or cannot be, or you are without that within your worldview. So that when you make evaluations as to whether your hair is parted correctly, or you like the taste of this cheeseburger, or that this politician's lying, or that Moses is not the author of the Pentateuch, or whatever,
right.
I want to know, what is your worldview that allows you to make any determination of true, false, good or bad, real or erroneous? What is that worldview?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer to it, except to say, things that, and it just sounds so generic when I say it, but if it comports with reality as I understand it.
Reality would just be another term for your worldview. So what would that be?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer for that.
So you don't even know what reality is then?
I don't know what reality is.
Yeah, that's a question. Do you know what reality is?
Yeah, no, I'm asking it out loud for my benefit.
Yeah.
Do I know? It's that question seems a lot
you
deeper.
You say certain things don't comport with reality. Is reality the same thing as your worldview?
It sounds like that's how you're defining it, and I'm fine with that.
I don't see how there to be a difference between reality and a worldview.
Yeah, I don't. That's not really a word that I use an awful lot. So that's just me not.
Yeah, your all encompassing view of everything. Reality, all encompassing.
Yeah.
Worldview. Okay. So
yeah.
Do you have a basic, clear worldview that will allow you grounds to evaluate whether propositions are acceptable or not acceptable?
Sure, and I feel like we're starting to go in circles a little bit here, which is probably my fault. But if something follows logic, but again, I think I've said that, and it's not really helping because I'm not saying it any more clearly, which isn't helpful. Yeah, so I think, for example, when I read through the flood story and I see 40 days and I see 150 days, or if I read through the creation story and I see, man created on the sixth day at the end of creation, and then I read through Genesis 2 and I see that he's created at the beginning, and then there's a separation of woman's created. In my mind.
Well, hold on a second. Okay, you're an educated man. Who says that the Genesis 2 is chronological?
Who says the Genesis 2 is chronological? Well, the text itself does.
Well, I've read the text. I don't see any conflict between Genesis 2 and Genesis 1, where it's very clear that we have a chronological sequencing in Genesis 1. All we have is just a recapping or a zooming in on Genesis 2. It's not necessarily chronological. And in fact, we have people who write books who do a chronological. For example, people who write political memoirs, sometimes they do a chronological sequencing, and then in following chapters, they'll just go into zooming in on certain events. Genesis 2 is not necessarily chronological.
Yeah, I think the way the Hebrew actually lays it out, though, in its syntactic forms, I think actually is laying it out chronologically. But the problem is coming at it, and this is why the chapter in the book about the authorship of the Pentateuch focuses in on this, because it's not an issue for biblical scholars to look at this, because
you're dead certain that Genesis 2 is chronological.
Dead certain. Sorry, in this conversation, I'm thinking through all your words now, just so that I make sure I understand the meaning behind it.
When I read Genesis 2 in various English translation, and obviously, you know Hebrew and I don't, but when I read all of the various English translation, I don't see why it necessitates that it has to be chronological.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that the Hebrew ipso facto dictates that it's chronological?
Ipso facto. Does it definitely? No, I don't know that I could prove to you.
Okay, so then it's not necessarily a contradiction. All right, okay.
Right. No, I agree with you. It's not necessarily a contradiction. I actually say this in the book several places. Like the Genesis 37 thing. The Genesis 37, I think it's a contradiction, but it's not necessarily one. So, if you read through it, you could say, and people have, I just think it's an unnecessary stretch to say that the Midianites pulled sold Joseph, the brothers sold Joseph to the Midianites, who sold him to the Ishmaelites, who took them down to Egypt, who sold them back to the Midianites, who then sold them to Egypt. Like you could possibly make that work. The problem is that I think it's totally misunderstanding how the text is put together, and it strains credulity. if that makes any sense, because there's two different stories, right? There's two different versions of the Joseph story that are brought together in Genesis 37. So it's not something that I think at the end of the day you can say, aha, this is a proof, I guess, in that mathematical sense. But it's something that it is the model that best explains the data points, in my opinion.
But your worldview doesn't explain anything, does it?
I think there's a difference, and I could be wrong, but I think there's a difference between what I know about what provides for, and I think that's the word you're using, provides for my worldview, and what provides for my worldview, right? So like I might not know all the details of something, but I see in practice enough that convinces me that X is the case. I don't know how that all functions. Like I don't understand the Big Bang, and science is not my thing at all. But the products of that, I think, allow me to function in a way that seems to work, to put it really roughly. I don't know, is consistent and.
Is there something in your worldview that connects all the dots, or makes anything?
Maybe.
No. Do you believe that there's anything in your world that connects the dots between particulars of existence and makes what things are, can be, or cannot be? Is there something that imposes that?
Imposes that, like as an agent would?
Yeah, because you're trying to examine the Bible, the Old Testament, and say, well, these dots connect, these dots don't connect, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that secures what is, can be, or cannot be? Is there something that does that in your worldview?
Oh, I have no idea.
Well, then why are you criticizing the Bible?
I guess I'm doing it based on maybe higher level, not higher.
Your worldview doesn't provide for critiquing anything.
Well, it seems to. I just don't know where it comes from.
What do you mean? It seems to.
I guess it works, practically speaking.
Well, how in order for something to work, something has to be imposing continuity and regularity. Is the continuity and regularity real?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it seems like it is.
Okay, so then all you're just simply talking about is it seems that way. Well, you could be wrong about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's no question.
Good. And you could be completely wrong about your critique about the Bible, right?
No question. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And you're willing to risk your eternal destiny on it?
I don't like it. But I have to go with what I think is true.
But what you
I don't like it.
But what you think is true has no metaphysical basis. There's nowhere in your worldview to ground truth. In the Christian worldview, and you've studied theology, you went to Capital Bible Study, and you would know from the Christian worldview, truth is that which conforms to the mind of God and how He reveals it. But in your worldview, what does truth conform to? And please don't say reality.
No, I won't, because I don't know is the answer.
So when you reject Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, as Creator, you can't say what is true or false, can you? Your worldview doesn't provide for it. There's no metaphysical grounding to say what is, can be, or cannot be.
It seems like the difference between me knowing what grounds it, and I'm like what
I want to know why you believe this stuff. You see, you believe that you do not need God. You do not need the God of the Bible as your creator and Lord and Savior and sustainer. So I want to know, because that is a grandiose statement in the course of human history. You've solved the biggest question of all human existence. You don't need God. You don't need the God of the Bible. So I want to know what you do believe, not necessarily what you know. What do you do believe that makes Jesus Christ as Lord and Creator utterly non-existent and superfluous? What do you believe ultimately about your world that makes Jesus Christ as Creator unnecessary?
I think it's probably coming at it from the other direction. So what I mean by that is, as I said before, the reason that I left the faith was because as I began to engage with, for example, where the Bible finds its origins, and noticed that the Hebrew Bible seems to be another ancient Near Eastern text.
Could you be wrong about that?
Oh yeah, sure.
Did you put that in your book?
That I could be wrong?
Yeah.
It's probably my motto.
But did you put it in the book?
That I could be wrong.
Yeah. So you believe that the text of the Old Testament is not the product of God inspiring holy men of the past to write down the message that He wanted. That's your position.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you know that?
Logic.
See, the way that you're using the word "know" there.
Why do you believe that?
Okay. So why I believe it is, given what I know about ancient Near Eastern culture and literature, the Bible fits in. The Hebrew Bible fits in very well with other ancient Near Eastern texts.
That doesn't mean it's not inspired by God.
But you're asking me why I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
But it doesn't follow then that it's not inspired.
Right. You're asking me why I believe it, though, which I think is different from why it necessarily follows. And I wouldn't say that it necessarily follows. Right. I would say I believe it.
So the Bible could possibly be the inspired word of God in your view?
Yeah, sure.
Did you put that in your
I don't think it's very likely. Well, I mean, I think that's
why is it not likely? What would make that off limits?
I feel like we're sort of circling back here.
Well, I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but you know.
No.
You're an atheist talking head. You're a really educated guy, and I respect that. And you've written a book, An Atheist Guide to the Old Testament, and I think that you're trying to get people to stop believing that the Bible is the Word of God, aren't you?
No. But sorry. If you're asking me, do I believe that it's inspired and inerrant? I'm trying to show in the book that I don't think that that's the case. My goal is not to turn people from Christianity. Again, that's my wife's a Christian. I don't really have any interest in that. What I do think, though, and this is in the book, I think it's in the conclusion and in the introduction, definitely in the conclusion, is that we all need to start on the right footing when it comes to the Hebrew Bible. And the right footing, in my opinion.
But there is no right and wrong in your world. There's nothing that grounds it.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's true.
Okay. Well, is there something that ultimately dictates what is, can be, or cannot be, and what is right, wrong, good, or bad in your world?
I'm sure that there is.
Oh, what is it?
Logic.
Right. I mean, I think we're sort of back to this question. And just because from like an epistemological standpoint,
well, I just want to know if you're offering us a nothing burger or there's some meat behind it, you know, like where's the beef? Okay.
Hold on. Because I'm going to have to, sorry, I don't mean to, I'm going to have to go in about 3 minutes. But,
no, that's fine. You've been more than gracious, and I appreciate it.
No, this is actually, this has actually been very nice. I guess what I would say is if you want, send me an email to digitalhammurabi@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to send you a PDF of the book.
Thank you.
we've priced it so that it's the Kindle version. I think is like $10, but all right, that's absolutely fine. I'll send you a copy.
You know what? Don't
But
bother
if you-
sending it. You wrote the book. I'll pay for it online. Okay, don't worry about it.
Oh, I appreciate that. But if you want, definitely read through it. Again, you seem to know far more about philosophy than I do. So, like, I tried to participate as much as I could.
And we didn't agree on a lot of things, but I didn't call you stupid. I didn't call you names because you don't want to know it. You're conducting yourself like an adult, and an educated person. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry that I'd probably be nicer if I had more concrete answers for some of these things, but there's just a lot that I don't know.
Well, I just wish you should just send the message to all your atheist friends on all these talking head atheist shows. I just like one of them to present a case why there's no God, because I'm not hearing from any of these talking heads an answer to that.